Hey y'all, Haley here at Teacher's Pet, and I am back with part 2 in our latest build and show series where I am going through and just setting up my latest online asynchronous course using a lot of the Teacher's Pet tools to help me do it. And I'm just going to show you what I'm working on, my thoughts, and how I'm sort of integrating all of that in there. If you are interested in any of these tools that I'm using, you can grab them at teacherspet.tech. And just reminders that all of this is in very sort of early release kind of a situation. Oh, and here comes my little dog. He's our mascot. All right, well, in this part of it, I am going to be hopping in and just really figuring out the schedule and flow for my semester and how the units and modules are going to be organized using my course building spreadsheet that I love just to track those kinds of things. And so that's going to be kind of the core piece, and then I'll show you how I actually set up my course prep. So all the materials that I know I need to create, I like to have it all in one kind of tab just to keep track of. So that's what I'm going to talk you through, and we will go over and see. Now in the same work session, I also worked on setting up a lot of the projects and getting some of the rubrics put together. So I will split that into a second and a third video. And so you'll see the same outfit because those kind of three pieces, right? Really working out the schedule, really thinking about what actually are the projects that are gonna be created, and kind of getting all that set up. Are really all three of the same work sessions and using those same tools. All right, let's hop in and talk a little bit more about the schedule and the course prep tracker. All right, so I am just working in my course building spreadsheet, really going through, right, and getting all of those topics mapped out and trying to figure out what am I actually going to be doing, throughout the semester. And so, I'd love to just go in and initially, type it all out. This is why I actually like using a spreadsheet, just to kind of keep track instead of a Word doc with the list view, or even how tables in a Word doc work. Don't love that so much. And so I like seeing, kind of all the lines and really just playing around with how all of that's going to go together. And so I like to start my weeks on Sundays, personally, but this class being asynchronous and online, my students can do it completely self-paced. So if they, want to start their weeks on a Tuesday, I really don't care. I'm just kind of laying it out this way so that way I can sort of think about all the topics in sort of that week by week semester basis. Even if the students, adjust how they get through the units and the modules. And I will be going through and putting on the learning topic and sort of reading material pages, putting those recommended due dates and timelines, because I've definitely just learned and in talking with a lot of my students, they, of course, and need the freedom so they can start practicing managing their own work. And this is a senior level class, and so part of what I'm doing is also helping them prepare for a lot of remote work that our fields and our majors would get to go into. So I want them to start, really practicing that remote accountability, but they do, still need a little bit of structure. That's part of kind of the learning process. So as I'm going through, I'm just kind of figuring out what is my key learning topics. And at this stage, again, very kind of brainstorming and pulling and thinking about how I had taught it in the past. Those core topics are staying the same, though I am combining a different senior seminar class, pulling in some of that knowledge and data here as I kind of go through and I just fill out my spreadsheet. So I have the big unit group, which as we saw in kind of the learning outcome area, every unit, right, is going to have some assignments and projects that they need to do. And since I'm working on a progressive kind of bundling setup for my ungrading, they'll need to complete, right, all the topics and all the tasks within each unit before they can unlock and move on to the next unit. And every time they get through a whole unit, it'll boost up their grade. So basically completing everything from unit 1, tech competencies, which will look like them, real focus on sort of the history and theory and kind of mechanics of computing specifically to our field, kind of the development of the various technology critical for our field. So they have that good historical perspective. And then we'll get into how kind of the LLMs and natural language processing and just all of that works for our field specifically, especially since in my field, the integration of various large language models has definitely been pretty wide, like more on the let's adopt and integrate kind of side than anything else. So I want to make sure that they really know and are going through that. And so that's where I'm kind of pulling from, right? Past semesters, past classes, where I was like, oh, these things worked really well. And I had sort of taught that class on more of a special rotating basis. So, not everything has to be straight from scratch. I'm thinking through some processes I had done previously. And for me, converting something from an in-person class to an online asynchronous class is really more grounded in reconceptualizing how it gets delivered, but of course the content itself gets recycled quite often. Okay, so then once I have that semester flow really set up, and start thinking about like the projects, which we'll see in part 3, I'll like go fully through all the projects. But I just make sure that I'm ready to just start filling out my next kind of piece, which is the actual like prep tracking element of it. And so in order for me to kind of go through and do that, I have this new kind of little sheet on my spreadsheet, which I love so much. It's just like my prep tracking and where I kind of audit all the materials as I kind of go through those elements. And so within my prep tracking sheet, I, just go ahead and copy and paste in just, everything from my kind of workflow as I'm going through that. And then, all the projects that I know I'm going to do. And within the spreadsheet, I actually have these drop downs. So that way I can see what needs to be worked on, what hasn't been worked on, what is going to be sort of something that needs to be updated or a problem or not. And I like to color code it as well as have these progress and completion bars. And so again, I can space out the work that I'm creating and just making sure it's all very organized that way. And so, yeah, as I'm just kind of going through, it's like, okay, I know for the projects, some of these things from the main template I won't need, some of them I will need. And I'm just really like kind of figuring out all of those pieces and elements. So I like copy that in, and then I start figuring out what I actually need to prep and making sure that the formula is correct. All right, so once I have my semester flow and really everything mapped out with, generally like what all the projects are going to be, then I hop into my page for the actual prep tracking. And this is just where I like to visualize exactly what's going on. So I have everything in there. And I'm just checking some of the formulas, just again to make sure it like calculates everything. And if you download it and it is set up, if you keep all the same basically amount of stuff, you'll be fine. But otherwise, I just want to just make sure that the math is mathing there. And so then, I'm kind of looking across and marking anything as published, that I don't need to worry about, and then kind of updating my top row. And so in my, kind of material audit, I know that I want to have a Canvas page, printable copy of the project, rubric, template, like for sure, all of those are going to stay. I want to do an FAQ, although PAL will definitely help with a lot of that. But then I don't need professional or student examples for this. Just by the nature of the type of course and level of student that we're working on, and a lot of those like examples will actually be sort of built into the activities that they are ultimately completing. I don't need a real world example because they're doing a mock project, so they already will have that kind of example built in there. But I do want the tutorial and kind of the help page. So I'm just scooching these headings over that I know that I need, just so it's like nice and clean and pretty. So if you download the template, right, just adjust the headers as you need. And then in the drop down, there's actually a not applicable. So you can delete them, but you'll just have to, pay attention to, the functions and stuff. And if there's anything, columns or rows that you don't need, then you can just go ahead and do that not applicable box, and the calculation will just take that into account already for you. So a bunch of things not applicable. So now I can focus on the things that are. Say I'm just kind of updating, breaks, not applicable. I don't have information. So technically that week of prep is done. And then everything else, just making sure to set it up so it's not reviewed. So I have a really good, clear view of how much work I have left to prep for this class. And that is kind of my basic, spreadsheet setup and how I need to kind of get that stuff done. So now thinking about my actual materials I'm going to prep for my semester map. I know all my primary material, which is mostly going to be a textbook. There's a few weeks that I'll be pulling other kind of textbook chapters, so I'm just going to call it primary. And then I also know that I, want to and will have some forms of like secondary materials that are going to be more multimedia or more industry based to complement the information from the textbook. And so I'm just, labeling my headers so I can mentally keep track of what needs to be done and what hasn't been done yet. Okay. And then I also know I'm going to be using an app called Genially to create more interactive, kind of asynchronous friendly slides, which actually are going to be more of like note-taking guides that students will need to, check off that they have completed within the Canvas shell is one of the tasks. It's not like a graded necessarily. It's just more like, hey, Scout's honor that you did this. And then I know I'll do a note-taking guide, and then I will just give them any bonus material in case, they are really interested in a subject. So I don't have quite as much number of things wise I'm going to be prepping there, but the Geniallys will take a while, and my plan for that is, I already have a bunch of slides that I'd use for the in-person version of it, so I will be converting the information from those slides into this Genially program. It allows them to, click buttons and embed videos a little bit more easily and streamlined than the way slides get shared. And so I'll just kind of be taking that info, recording shorts and small videos. That way they can sort of have a nice guided kind of lecture information that then complements the textbook chapter they're reading. And that's actually one big difference. When I teach this class in person, I actually don't assign the textbook, and we just basically do lectures, discussion, and they don't have to buy the book. It's just on their recommended list. But for the online version, I am having them actually, buy the book, read the book, and then my Genially interactive lectures will get kind of pared back a little to make sure they're understanding the key things from the book that they read, since we, of course, aren't there to talk with them. So we'll be talking with them through videos and that interactive kind of piece. Now I'm just finishing up my audit and kind of thinking about, okay, what do I have started, and that's what I mark as in progress or sort of almost ready. And so I do know the Canvas pages are in progress because I went and set those up, but they are empty and sort of blank. So they aren't ready to be, kind of final reviewed, but they are at least started. The textbook chapter, Orientation to the Course, I'm going to be pulling from a project management OER textbook that I wrote. So I do know that's in progress. And so I'll be, getting all those materials up and online. And yeah, then I'm just going to go through and figure out and try to see, okay, how much work is ahead of me in the next, month before the semester starts. And it certainly is a lot, but I get a nice big number. Okay, 46% done basically. Now I just need to get 64% more before August 20th when my semester starts. All right, I feel good about kind of the schedule that's built out. And so kind of my big picture next steps that I'm working on is then actually building the kind of stuff out in Canvas. But the next videos in this series, so part 3, I'm going to talk through like actually getting the projects like themselves together, and kind of just how I like to do the assignment sheets and a little bit of what my actual Canvas like unit progression shell will look like before I get into creating some rubrics. So I'll see you over there in the next videos. And until then, I hope that you have a great class.